Originally, I was preparing to make a video about how you can have a calm, peaceful life, which is a part 2 of a video that I've already made. But while I was doing that, I realized how much of an impact of a good night's sleep was in having a really productive, calm, peaceful life. And that got me thinking about how I was struggling with my sleep cycles a few months back and all the things that I've done to make it better. And that's how this video was born. For the sake of organization, I have divided this video into 3 parts. The first one is mindset shifts. The second one is a few things you can do a few hours before your bedtime. And the third part is things you can do when you can't really sleep, meaning in the moment. Let's start with something that I consider to be most important. Okay, so sometimes we really do want to sleep, but we aren't really able to control our brains. Like, we know that we should sleep right now and we should do everything we can to get a good night of sleep, but we're just somehow not able to do that. And one thing that works for me in this scenario is separating myself from the self that's going to wake up next morning. I mean, it's you, you're yourself. The past you is you and the future you is you. But when you see it as, if I don't sleep right now, myself who's going to wake up in the morning will not be fresh enough to get through her day, and she does not deserve that. Should not be selfish and run for quick dopamine, and should genuinely attempt to sleep right now so that my future self can have a great day. This simple thing doesn't seem to be much now, but when you do it, it makes a huge difference. Suddenly, your attempts are much more genuine. Another thing is romanticizing your sleep cycle or sleep process. This actually comes from a phase in my life when I really loved sleeping. Somehow I used to wait to sleep. Like, I used to imagine that I'm going to sleep on my bed and I'm going to have my soft blanket and soft pillow and I'm going to feel warm and I'm going to sleep. So when I actually did go to bed, I would immediately fall asleep because I loved sleeping. So I use that phase as a reference sometimes. So sometimes I would really imagine being in a temperature that I'm comfortable with, feeling my blankets and soft pillows and my dim light that's in my room. And sometimes I would romanticize my skincare routine that I do just before bed. In short, I think of sleeping as a really pleasant, calming, fun experience. And when I do that, it helps me ignore any distractions that I might have and actually want to stay and fall asleep. Now with that, we are moving on to our next category, which is a few things that you might have been doing which are wrong, or a few things that you should stop doing. The first thing I want to talk about is if you happen to be a night person, or you happen to be in a creative field, or your job is of nature that you need to do a lot of thinking during the day and even before near your bedtime, chances are that whatever it is that you were thinking about just before your bedtime is interfering with your sleep cycle. It's not like there is a switch in our brain so that we would stop thinking about something immediately. So in this situation, I would suggest that you do something that breaks this flow of your brain. Anything that can pull you out of this whirlwind of thoughts. Things like spending time with your family, or reading a book, or even watching an episode of Friends. This is to make sure that we are not bringing those thoughts to bed. We all have experience dreaming about something that we were doing at our jobs. Next one is timing your chores. This is the one that I'm struggling with these days. So what happens is sometimes we do sleep more than the required amount of time, but since we are getting disturbed in the middle of our sleep, we still don't feel well rested. If possible, I would suggest you to schedule things in a way that you don't have to wake up in the middle of your sleep. But in case that's not possible, I would suggest moving your sleep cycle a little bit up or down based on these chores. Setting the right environment. So I have 3 things that I want to talk about under this topic. The very first is the fabrics that are being used, meaning your blanket or your pillow. Your pillow should be something that's comfortable to you. It doesn't have to be the highest of quality, but it should be something that you are comfortable with. And your blanket should be something that matches with your temperature and your comfort level. Meaning, if I am a kind of person who feels cold all the time, I would prefer something that is warm in nature. And vice versa, if I'm someone who is warmer, I would like to have something that feels cold. This might definitely change based on seasons, but basically when I go to bed, I want to make sure that my bed is as comfortable as it can get all the time. Next is sound and lights. So basically any kind of noise that's not pleasant to my ears. Like sometimes the noise from a clock can bother you, so that needs to go away. And if you're a kind of person who prefers to have a small light in the room while you're sleeping, that's what should happen. And if you prefer your room to be darker, that's what should happen. Third is have things exactly the way you prefer in the moment. Meaning, so I am a kind of person who really likes to sleep with the noise of fan and with a blanket. But on some days, the noise of the fan can bother me. So on those days, I should be able to shut the fan off. Same way, if I happen to be a kind of person who prefers a dark room, but on some day, if I have just watched a horror movie and a little bit of light gives me that sense of comfort, then that's what I should be doing. It's very simple and basic, but not quite intuitive sometimes. Another thing I want to talk about is skincare routine. So previously, I used to do my skincare right before I hit bed. So since I am the kind of person who figures that washing a face actually wakes me up and it's not calming to me, I used to feel that the little sleep that I had was going away when I washed my face. So if that's the same case for you, I would suggest that you do your skincare a couple of hours before your bedtime, or at least an hour before your bedtime. I'm sure you saw it coming, scrolling. So recently I have gotten into a habit of scrolling right before my bedtime. So if that's the same case for you, I would suggest at least shut the volume off. And if you can, I would suggest switching to a different kind of dopamine. Doing Netflix is better than scrolling. And even better would be reading something. A graphic novel is fine. If you can, reading just letters would be perfect. But to each their own, and it's gonna take time. So I would suggest not jumping directly from scrolling to book, but taking gradual steps. That way you will be able to make progress and stick to it, as compared to doing the best thing for a few days. Next is, again, something everyone talks about, caffeine. If you're someone who loves caffeine a lot, I would suggest that the first step would be switching to something that's less caffeinated. If you want to and can, directly getting rid of caffeine would be the best thing to do, but in my opinion, baby steps always win. So switching to something like a green tea, especially something that's calming, soothing and made to fall asleep like chamomile, would be a great alternative. If you're someone like me who loves caffeine, I know it's going to be hard, and honestly green tea isn't that tasty. But one thing that helps me is romanticizing my green teas, like putting them into pretty little glass and having them in a huge variety like dandelions and chamomile and other teas that are calming and soothing. Let's move on to our most interesting section or category, which is things that I do when I can't really fall asleep in the moment. The first and foremost thing I do in case I am not able to fall asleep because I'm worried about something or anxious about something is pray. So if you happen to be someone who really believes in God, you would be able to relate to it and do it. My prayers generally look something like this. Dear God, or whatever you want to call them, these are the things that I'm worried about and I seem to have no control over it, but I know that you do. And since I am yours, my worries are yours too. So I am going to give the control of my life and all my worries to you, and I'm going to pray that you please allow me to fall asleep calmly. This, at the very least, takes the heaviness out of my heart and makes my head lighter. And even if you're not worried about anything, praying still works. And sometimes I would chant something that I know by heart repeatedly until I fall asleep while I'm chanting it, some kind of shlok or mantra. But if you don't believe in God, I still have a lot of things for you. Thinking about a place that's comforting and pleasant for you. So it doesn't really have to be a real life place. You can take your own sweet time to build yourself a nice, pretty, imaginary or reality-based place that is comforting to you and which can help you fall asleep. Use a real life memory or a scene from a movie or a book as well. For example, I have this memory where I'm just running on the road because I happen to get the first rank on junior high or something. It wasn't really a big achievement, but it's not really about the memory itself, it's about how it makes you feel. And in that moment, I feel like I have everything, I do not lack anything, and I am very, very happy and satisfied and at peace. Sometimes I would even use a few things from fiction. So if you have watched my video about fiction, you would know how much I love fiction. So sometimes I would have these scenes that I know in great detail. Like I would know the expressions, the background actors, and the scene, and the dialogues, and the way they walk, and their hand gestures, and everything. So I would replay that over and over again in my head until I fall asleep. Another thing you can do is writing things down, things that are going through your head or things that are making you worried or anxious. Now, I don't mean that you take 10 minutes to write things down in great detail. I mean you write just the bullet points and you tell yourself that this is the list of things that you want to think about, but you're not going to think about it right now. And you want to really comfort yourself by saying that these are not the things that you've forgotten about. You are going to take care of these things later, tomorrow. So today you just need to focus on sleeping well. Sleep podcasts. These are the podcasts created especially to make people fall asleep. These are generally on the topic that we typically find boring, like pottery or early days of television, but you want to be mindful and pick something that's boring to you, since I have found a few of those episodes which were quite interesting to me. Another thing I do when I need to break the flow of my brain is sometimes I would just wake up and walk for like a couple of minutes, and sometimes I would read a page or two from some book or some article, or sometimes I would take a look at my plants or my family members, which would be sound asleep, or sometimes I would stare at the things that I've created, maybe a few paintings or some things that I've written. Sometimes I would just drink some water. Basically anything that would help me calm down and break the flow of those thoughts that were running through my head. But please make sure to not take too long, and I would suggest that when you go back to sleep, you at least change the sides. So if you were sleeping on north, you sleep on something that's not north, as in putting your head on the other side of the bed. Or sometimes you can even sleep on a sofa if that's something comfortable for you. Or you can sleep in another room or hall if that's something that works for you. Now there are a couple things that are quite odd. The first thing is gently tapping your head. So I would just simply place my hand on my forehead or the back of my head and just tap it for a little while until I'm tired. And the point here is not to focus on the sensation that is coming from your hand, but to the forehead. Or just gently touching your forehead, or sometimes even massaging your face works. But I understand that that might be tiring. So sometimes you want to go for a part of your body that's colder than usual. For example, if I am in a colder climate and my hands are warm, I want to reach for a part that's colder. For example, if my hand were to be cold, I want to gently press down on my hands so that my focus is on the touch that my hand is feeling. Anything that is shifting your focus from what you're thinking to something that you're feeling works. But you want to make sure that you are not listening to your heartbeat here. That for some reason makes me feel anxious. Another thing that I have picked up is doing Shavasana. It's actually a variant of Shavasana. In this variant of mine, you just basically sleep however you are comfortable, and it's basically about calming and relaxing your body. So you basically want to start from your toes and move up to your head and feel if there is any kind of strain or any kind of stiffness in any of your body parts. If there is, you want to release that. It is basically yoga, so it has that soothing, calming, relaxing effect on your body. Plus you really need to focus so you can get rid of any thoughts that might be running through your head. You can also focus on your breathing while you're at it, but it tends to make me focus too much to fall asleep, so I don't do that. But there is an option. Alright, so these were the things that I've accumulated over the years to make myself fall asleep, but I'm always in the lookout for more in case some of these things stop working. If you happen to have some tips and tricks, I will be very grateful. But chances are you're here because you could not fall asleep. So it's okay, go catch up on your sleep. and come back tomorrow morning and let me know if I helped. Good night.